Hello and welcome to our team by team previews with Attacking Third. We are on YouTube, so make sure you subscribe to us and like this video and drop your thoughts in the comments because we want to hear all of your opinions about Portland Thorns FC, NOL reign. Hello and welcome to Attacking Third, a CBS Sports soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On today's segment, we are going to begin with a Portland Thorns preview. So before we get into everything, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. We're also on YouTube. Subscribe to us at youtube.com/attacking third. Make sure you get all that exclusive NWSL content, previews, recaps, interviews right here on Attacking Third. The NWSL season starts March 25th. You can watch games on Paramount Plus, and we are doing a team preview for every single club in the NWSL. Make sure you watch them on YouTube or listen to them on a podcast. Tell all your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbors, tell your mom's dog, tell your cousin's dog. Just spread the word, spread the good gospel of the NWSL. It's starting, and we're still doing the previews. Lisa, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk through a couple teams, some top teams right now, starting with Portland Thorns. And I mean, they're winners. They're reigning champions right now. So this is fun. Like, it's fun to talk about every single team. I'm not going to pick favorites here, but it's really fun to talk about successful teams and how that translates to the next year, because there can be a lot that goes right and a lot that goes wrong.
There's a target, right? I mean, when we're looking at the landscape of the 12 teams in this league, you can point at certain clubs and say, okay, well, those are going to be contenders moving forward. And I think it goes without saying that when you look at Portland Thorns as the reigning NWSL champions, that is just an automatic target for this team. Let's talk a little bit about their offseason. Let's start with a team overview for the Thorns. They had an interesting offseason. I think that's the best way we could put it, because they had a lot of attention on the front office and the technical staff side of things. Because when we get to the roster portion of this, there's not a whole lot of changes, but we see a lot of different things going on for this team going into 2023. When we look at the technical staff, they promoted former goalkeeper coach Mike Norris to head coach after the resignation of Ryan Wilkinson in December 2022. We're talking just weeks, really months, maybe, after winning the NWSL Championship. And so they went ahead and just promoted from within, trying, I guess, an attempt to try to retain some of the culture and apparently taking some player feedback as well, and want to run with the as much of the same team as possible moving forward. And I guess that also includes the technical staff, which is why when we saw the consequences drop for an investigation around this club, it included some swift changes for the technical staff side of things. The Portland Thorns are no longer with assistant coach Sophie Claw and trainer Pierre Sobriere, following an investigation into various allegations of misconduct. We talked a little bit about this on an episode specifically. Within this investigation, the league had made a release issuing some transparent updates about those investigations with the Thorns specifically, but also the Washington Spirit. So they were announced adjacent to each other, but there was a lot more within this investigation for the Thorns. Essentially, the league announced that there were investigations involving the Thorns that included several individuals who essentially were terminated by the club, and some are now ineligible for employment with the league in the near future, pending some conditions. Former trainer Pierre Sobrier was found to have given codeine to players without a prescription. And Sophie Clo has to go through some trainings if she wants to, try and, get another position in this league, because there were allegations of inappropriate behavior. So big changes, I think, when you're looking at that. It's not just like, hey, we promoted a head coach because our other head coach resigned. This is This is a technical staff that was with this team all throughout the duration of their championship
Yeah.
run,
Yeah, I
and
think that's
that
the
doesn't
most
happen anymore.
interesting kind of part about it is that immediately after this team wins the NWSL Championship, it's found out that they have been going through a bit of an investigation, not only with some technical staff and medical misconduct on that front, but also with their head coach and a little bit of misconduct there, and two separate investigations happening. And this really all came to a head right after the season ended, right? The new head coach in Mike Norris was hired January 9th. This was right after the season ended, right before the NWSL draft for this year. So it all happened very quickly on the heels of a championship and on the heels of, or really at the start of what could have been a very celebratory offseason for this team. And I think still was very celebratory because they won the league, and that's massive. But they then had to face a little bit of poor news, right? And poor news circulation because of what was happening in these investigations, which changed a lot of kind of how the offseason went, I think, for them. But in terms of the overall changes for this team, like, the main ones happen in the front office, not with the personnel and the players by any means.
No, when we're looking at the overview of this team, it really is just about the sort of rotating bench, and we don't mean that in terms of the players. It really is just the extended staff. I mean, and that also includes, we can also really include Heather Davis,
Yeah.
as being appointed as the CEO of the Portland franchises, both the Timber and the Thorns. But in terms of revisiting this team, the players who are going to play on the pitch in this regular season, a lot of the 2022 roster was retained to go ahead and compete and try to run it back in 2023. They finished in the standings in number 2 with a 10-9-3 record. So they narrowly missed out on the Shield to OL Reign. But that still meant that they got that bye straight to the semifinal. They were able to go ahead and advance to the finals, and then ended up winning the whole dang thing out in DC. So when we looked at
And
their
dominant
season,
winning the whole
oh
thing
my
out in
God,
DC. Like,
yeah,
it
Sophia
was like
Smith.
a stamp on it. It was not a close game,
No,
against
no,
Kansas
no.
City.
Which was interesting because we were
Yeah.
curious how that was going to look. There's some players on the Thorns that had never experienced a championship final like that, and yet they went out there and they did the thing. We were curious, with that win, what that would mean for this roster in the off season. Was there going to be, we're going to see a lot of turnover. We knew that Christine Sinclair was one of those players that were going to be probably sought after on the free agency list. She met the eligibility requirement as someone who has had more than 6 years of playing service within NWSL. What was going to happen there? She announced with enthusiasm at a trophy celebration rally that she was going to come back with the team for one more year so that they can try to chase a 4th championship specifically. But not a ton of major movement, but that doesn't necessarily mean they had a poor offseason. We gave them an off-season grade of a B, a solid B for Portland. And I think a big part of that was due to the fact that they did retain so much of their roster, but we also really liked how they navigated the draft.
Yeah.
They entered draft day with just one pick, and all of a sudden they found themselves with 2 top selections in the first round, a number 5 selection and the number 12 selection. They ended up selecting Reina Reyes out of Alabama, Izzy Diakia from Santa Clara, but they also made some additional picks for depth. In their later rounds, forward Lauren DeBow and the goalkeeper Lori Cazal from Michigan State, both at number 24 and number 32, respectively. So, I mean, I think there's something to be said that you're a championship caliber winning team and you want to retain most of those pieces. That's
Yeah.
a successful offseason. I think if you could do that.
Yeah, I agree completely because not only did they re-sign Christine Sinclair, which could have arguably been one of the biggest free agents if she hadn't re-signed as soon as they lifted that trophy. I mean, good for her. She wants to stay in Portland. Christine Sinclair will finish out her career, her professional career in Portland. I have no doubt about that. But they also re-signed Costa Rican international Rocky Rodriguez Rodriguez, who has been a big part of the glue of this midfield for this Thorns team. And then the breakout rookie for the Portland Thorns last year, and Sam Coffey, who got a crack at the U.S. women's national team, who's been in the World Cup talk for the United States over the last several months. It was a Rookie of the Year nomination for that Portland Thorns season that she had, playing the defensive mid, arguably one of a more veteran position on a pitch, to have a rookie step in and play there. And not only that, but the fact that a championship team that lifts the trophy, wins the title one year, 2 months later is getting 2 first-round draft picks. Like, fantastic. What is your secret, Portland Thorns? Like, that is fantastic. That's not how it's supposed to happen. For those that are not usually American fans, and the draft is a bit confusing to them, usually the winner of the season prior gets last pick going into the draft. So they don't get to pick top talent in the first round, even the second round sometimes, because they just won. They've already got a stacked team. They're coming off a championship season. That's how these drafts work in America. And Portland somehow finagles their way into 2 first-round draft picks. And not only 2 first-round draft picks, 2 massive picks in Reina Reyes and Izzy De Aquila. Massive picks for those teams and that team and those players. That's why we give them a B. And I stand by that B, because also not that many changes needed to be made, but I think they still added what they needed to. And I also think the way that Portland handled the new coaching hire, it was definitely not what they wanted to do, right? Have to hire a new coach after they just win the championship. So they stick with someone that's already been in the family. Mike Norris, hired before the 2022 season and was an assistant throughout their championship run, and now can slot into that head manager role right as soon as Rian Wilkinson leaves. And it's not too much of a hiccup for the team. I think they handled that pretty well.
I think it's important to note that they wanted to try to get player feedback, in this process, and that's ultimately something that led to just the eventual promotion of Norris into the role. And I think, the offseason could go by pretty quickly, in a blink. So there actually isn't as much time as I think people anticipate to try to find not just the head coach, but the right coach, because that's something else that we've had to cover when we talk about NWSL and hiring practices over the last 2 years. It's a different type of practice now. The vetting process is not what it used to be in the first decade of this league, where a lot of times it was just not as many checks and balances, and that just is no longer the case anymore in this league. I remember when you and I had to cover the Red Stars head coaching hiring process, and hearing from Chris Petroselli and saying how it was the most strenuous hiring process that he had ever been through. And he's someone who's been around the game for quite some time, both at the collegiate level and even with amongst national team programs. And he was like, this was very, very intense.
Yeah.
So, you have to imagine trying to cast a wide scope in a very, very limited amount of time in your off season. And I think for the Thorns to try to get as much feedback as they could from their players to ultimately try to retain what they had built last season is a plus for them moving forward. But, I guess that could be considered, when we're looking at losses that this team suffered in the offseason, that is technically a loss. I mean, you are put in a position to where you have to make a new head coaching hire. They also witnessed the retirement of a player in Melissa Everett, who's actually going to make the choice to go on back to school, wants to go and become a nurse. But they also, in order to get those extra picks in the first round, they said farewell to Yasmin Ryan, who was an essential piece for this team down the stretch, really in that second half of the season, all the way through to the championship final. We want to talk about players who had excellent games in those big time moments. Yasmin Ryan was one of those players. So pretty significant player to move in a trade with Gotham FC. But you're talking 1 to 2 players from an entire championship roster. That's not a bad turnout for your offseason, I think, if you're the Thorns.
I agree completely. Yeah, I mean, for sure, the biggest loss for Portland is Yasmin Ryan. I mean, all the wellest of wishes to Marissa Everett and the time she put in with this league and with this team. But Yasmin Ryan is a player that had invested in Portland and Portland invested in Ryan, because when you look back to 2 years ago, 2021, Yasmin Ryan was a player that stood in the wings a lot, worked really hard in training, and just wasn't really able to get her moment to shine. She was able to come in during the Olympic stretch and get significant time, but it was really just filling a hole for the superstars that were gone and missing on an international break. And that's what happened with Ryan in 2021. In 2022, in speaking with the coaching staff at Portland, Ryan is a player that worked her tail off in the offseason to become a starting player, to push someone out of a starting position and make it hers. And we saw that evolution of a player of Ryan throughout the 2022 season, that by the end, she is a consistent starter in the lineup. She's consistently engaged in the attacking part of the field, contributing to goal scoring opportunities in the build up to goal scoring plays. Now, a lot of the goal scoring fell to someone like a Sophia Smith when you look at this Portland Thorns roster, but Ryan was part of it, getting tackles in the 18-yard box to win the ball over and to start the high counter press, to be a flank player and send crosses into the box, and then immediately be that defensive wingback that Portland needed. Ryan fed into the Portland Thorns system, and Portland, they worked really well together, I'm going to say. And with this massive trade that happened, Yasmin Ryan went from Portland to LA for a couple hours and ends up in Gotham, which a team that, I mean, we talked about it, but with Ryan not being at Portland anymore, I think that's one of the biggest losses for this team, because now they have to fill a hole that they most recently filled with a player like Ryan.
I think we're going to flesh out the remainder of this roster. We could chat a little bit about who we think might step up in the absence of this player. So we're going to go through Portland's entire preseason roster with everyone right after a quick break.
March Madness is almost here. Who's in? Who's out? The answers are revealed on the March Madness Selection Show, March 12th on CBS.
All right, let's chat a little bit about the preseason roster for Portland Thorns. There have been some cuts for some teams as the regular season inches closer and closer. But for Portland, this is who we saw through the preseason. We saw Bella Bixby, Shelby Hogan, and Lauren Cazal for the goalkeeping core. For defenders, they listed 10 with Shaylin Hubbard, Kelly Hubley, Megan Klingenberg, Natalie Cuica, Tegan McGrady, Emily Menges, Megan Nally, Gabby Provenzano, Orena Reyes, and Becky Sauerbrunn. For midfielders, 8 are listed: Sam Coffey, Crystal Dunn, Olivia Moultrie, Taylor Porter, Sydney Pulver, Rocky Rodriguez, Christine Sinclair, and Hina Sugita. And for forwards, Janine Becky, Natalie Beckman, Hannah Beffer, Izzy Diakia, Lauren DeBow, Sophia Smith, Michelle Vasconcelos, and Morgan Weaver included amongst the forward as well. Let's talk a little bit about these players. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4-ish players listed as draft players amongst this roster. So we know right away those are the new faces in this team. But we're talking about 4 draft picks amongst so many other players who've already had some time together, a number of which are champions together as well. Maybe let's start with the midfielders, because we were just talking about Yasmin Ryan and what that could look like, and the hole that she may or may not be leaving behind in her absence. Coffey, Dunn, Moultrie, Porter, Pulver, Rodriguez, Sinclair, Sugita. I know when we were watching Thorns games last year, we were really, really high on Sugita, and I just think he's going to be another one of those players that they really rely upon.
Yeah,
in the middle, especially in light of the absence of Ryan.
Yeah, I think they will rely on someone like Hina Sugita, and not only the technical skill, but the football IQ of a player like Sugita, to be able to play this really smart, intelligent style football that Portland likes to play. And despite a coaching change at the helm for the Thorns, I don't think the style of football is going to change all that much, because Mike Norris, now head coach, was there last year. He understands the foundation that Portland Thorns has and what they want to play. And also last year in 2021, Portland Thorns saw the return of Crystal Dunn towards the end of the year, that a player like Dunn slowly building more and more minutes up. And as we know from her international play during this offseason, Dunn is back. She's 100% ready to go, 90-minute games. Let's go, which I think maybe also helps fill that hole of a Yasmin Ryan, which I mean, the fact that Ryan is no longer there, there's still a lot of talent on this roster. I'm hoping to see more from Olivia Moultrie. This is a player that we've seen an evolution over the last couple of years, more and more minutes, more consistency, continuing to grow her international game. But can we see even more consistency from a Moultrie? Maybe a few consecutive starts from this player, which is something we really haven't seen too much of. I think the midfield is one of the pieces of this Portland Thorns puzzle that is perhaps the most stacked with the talent that they have in Sam Coffey, Crystal Dunn, Christine Sinclair, Hina Seguida, Rocky Rodriguez. And then also the part that still has some holes to fill in terms of how they're going to play against opposition this year, because the other teams in the league have also kind of leveled up their midfield, so to say. And of course, this is a World Cup year. We're going to talk about it, but that leaves a lot of holes. But in this forward group, there's a lot of fun names that jump out, but Morgan Weaver is a player that I want to continue to see evolve with this Portland Thorns team. She's one that has had moments of greatness and then had a lot of moments of really good contribution. But I want to see her score more goals. Honestly, it sounds so simple to ask that of a forward and Morgan Weaver, but I know she's playing alongside someone like a Sophia Smith who so easily knocks them back and finds the back of the net. But I want Morgan to challenge Sophia Smith in that goal scoring race at Portland Thorns. I just want to see a little bit more from Weaver this year in her all-fall movement and her shot selection.
I think maybe this is the year to do that. We've talked a lot in some of these previews about this being a World Cup year and how these international cycles tend to provide, opportunities for players in the absence of, international players who are off, with their national teams for something like an Olympics or a World Cup. So I don't think that's like an unrealistic thing to present. I think in this case for the Thorns, when we're looking at the personnel in front of them and players who will likely be with the team throughout some of these long stretches in the absence of some of these other players, and we'll talk about some of those players who are going to go missing perhaps for Portland's, because there's a lot of them, and we'll break them all down. But in terms of looking at starting 11s and who can make impacts on game days for this team, whether it's a young prospect or that experienced veteran, I think when we ran through this roster, pointed out about 4 different draftees on the preseason roster. So when it comes to that young prospect, who do we want to see make an impact? And we're going back and forth a little bit because I think there's room to actually make a selection for some of these draft picks, but there's also room to present that for players who are going to have a sophomore season in NWSL. And for the Thorns, we're looking at Reina Reyes as someone to possibly get in there, make a name for herself, and try to say, hey, you picked me with your number 5 pick overall. You obviously want to keep me as a piece, maybe build with me, and I'm going to show you that I'm worth it. But there's also somebody like a Sam Coffey.
Yeah.
While she re-signed with the team, going to enter a sophomore season with the Thorns, and how is she going to look now that now that she's got a sense of security? Really, they renegotiated the contract. They wanted to make sure to lock her up, and that can benefit a player moving forward.
Yeah, I hope that the contract negotiation for Coffey to sign her for a considerable amount of time after her rookie year does give that player a little bit of confidence. And I think that this offseason has been challenging for a player like Sam Coffey because of the international conversation, because Sam Coffey was in and out of the women's United States women's national team roster. She went to New Zealand, and then she didn't play at all in New Zealand, and then she didn't get rostered for the She Believes Cup in February. And is she out of that conversation? And I think it can affect a player's mentality about the sport when you are in that group in that conversation and now you're no longer. But for someone like a Coffey, I think that because it happened in January and February leading up to the start of a season at the end of March, I'm hoping that the maturity of a player that had so much pressure and had to grow a lot as a professional in 2022 is able to take that experience of the international game and not being called in to be able to say, okay, I'm going to focus all of my energy onto my club team and be so much better than I was last year when she's already at the top of her game. The ceiling is so high for a player like Coffee. I want to see her continue to grow and take those steps. And I hope that she has the confidence to do that this year. Now, there's always the side of it that goes, she knows a little bit more about the league. And she did go through and get a Rookie of the Year nomination and win the championship. And the naivety of being a rookie maybe helped her a little bit. But I think that she's still surrounded by the same players, all but one, that were there last year. She is still familiar with Mike Norris as the coach. I'm excited for Coffee, and I think Reina Reyes could step in as, despite being a draft pick and a rookie this year and a defender who we don't often see get a lot of time. I think she's one of the players that we could see get rotated in and start to get a little bit more time in the back line as this year kind of unfolds.
Yeah, no, we'll have to see, especially during those Challenge Cup windows.
Yeah.
When that's where there will be some midweek matches, and we'll have to take a look at it maybe during the stretch of a World Cup in light of some players who will go missing. And listen, for the Thorns, there's a lot of big names on this roster, but that also means that they're big names because they're attached to national teams as well, and not just the United States. We're talking Canada, Japan. Talking Costa Rica. So let's take a look at some of these players who might go missing for some stretches of time here. Christine Sinclair and Janine Becky, we feel will be absent, likely representing Canada in a World Cup. Hina Sugita is someone that we could see with Japan after, we're talking about this is a player that they might rely upon a bit in the midfield, even more so than they did in her inaugural season with the club last year. But Becky Sauerbrunn, Crystal Dunn, Sophia Smith. Listen, those are locks for us. I know we think we're going to see them at the World Cup for the United States, whether there's a final roster announced yet or not. But there's also Rocky Rodriguez for Costa Rica. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 7 possible
massive
player. We're talking about starting caliber players.
7 starters that could be gone for the bulk of the Challenge Cup play throughout this year in 2023. I mean, and these are big names, especially when you look at the midfield that could be lost, right? That's a Christine Sinclair, Hina Sugita, Crystal Dunn, Rocky Rodriguez. That's why when we talked about the midfield and we looked at this roster, we pointed out players like a Sam Coffey, like an Olivia Moultrie. Can they really step in and fill some of those holes that these international players are going to leave? And I also think that's why it allows for someone like a Reina Reyes as the young prospect, a rookie this year out of Alabama, to get some significant time in the Challenge Cup days for this Portland Thorns side, because someone like a Becky Sauerbrunn is going to be gone. And yes, they have Kelly Hubley in the back line, Megan Klingenberg, Kuika, but I want to see Reyes get some time. I mean, these are huge names, huge names.
No, me too. I'm with you. Listen, they participated in that multi-team trade in order to get the extra first round selection. My hope is that these players do enough in preseason to earn themselves a contract, and maybe we get to see them during this international cycle. The disjointed, though, leaves a lot of room for some what ifs. We've seen teams struggle during these stretches of times. I don't know if I would necessarily include Portland in that equation. I think the last time maybe they went on a really tough streak during a World Cup cycle might have been during that 2015 World Cup. They didn't look too bad to me during the cycle of 2019, and they didn't look too bad during that Tokyo Olympic cycle either, in terms of the absence of players there. So there's something to say about this club retaining the players that they have played in the NWSL Championship, and it's still mostly that roster who lifted the trophy. But with some of the players who will come in and come out, it still leaves room for the question of how they're going to fare during these international stretches. But that's not our biggest burning question. Our biggest burning question for Portland is, can they repeat? Because we believe that they can. It's tough to win championships in the National Women's Soccer League. We've heard players talk about that all of the time. It's such a triumphant moment when they do win titles. You can see the joy on their faces and the agony and defeat when they miss out on it. So we know how hard it is to win titles. We cover it, we watch it all the time, but it's even harder to win consecutive championships. And the last time I think we saw that was during that stretch of run with the North Carolina Courage. 2018 and 2019. So we haven't seen it.
Very hard to do. I remember last year during the playoff run, we talked about one of the graphics that CBS was using a lot was the back-to-back winners and how it worked. And you look at a team like Washington Spirit that won in 2021, and then we're suffering in 2022. Now we have this team and their roster, Washington's roster, did not change much going from 2021 to 2022. And now we have this Portland team that their roster hasn't changed too much going from one championship year to the other. And when you look at the landscape of all other 11 teams in the NWSL, their rosters have bulked up tremendously. Can Portland do it? Can they do a two-peat? It is going to be much harder than it ever was last year, much harder than they ever imagined it to be. But because of who they've got, the players, the personnel, the fact that they were able to do it last year, I predict a top 3 finish for this team to end the year. I do. I think they'll be right there competing for a first-round bye at the end of the season during the playoffs. And then once you get into playoffs, it's a whole other story. But I think that Portland could do it. If there's a team that can do it, it's this Portland side. There's a lot of similarities to that North Carolina team that went back-to-back a few years ago.
When we were going through our rundowns and contemplating this, we had approximately 3 teams that we knew that we felt are going to round out the top 3 and top 4. We got to call it top 4 because it's always been 4 teams that are considered like the heavyweight contenders. Prior to the playoff expanding to 6 teams, it was always 4 teams in a semifinal and then championship finals appearance. Now there's a quarterfinal round and then a semifinal round, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're a top 4 team, that means you get to host. So it means something to be a top 4 team. But for the Thorns, we think it's going to be somewhere in the top 3. It's not even going to be top 4. We think it's going to be top 3 for sure. I just think the Thorns aren't too different. I think that's something that is the one common thread. I think when we're talking about this World Cup year and all of these previews for each of the 12 clubs, every single team is going to go through a stretch of time where they are missing key players. Are there going to be some teams with more players absent than some others? Sure. But I think the Thorns and the depth of their roster have shown that they can stay relevant.
Yeah.
They can compete through those stretches. And I think that's what gives them a little bit of the X factor.
That's what makes them scary. If you're other teams and you're looking at this Portland side, that's what makes them scary.
I mean, we talked a little bit about even last year with watching somebody like Yasmin Ryan. It's like once she got that opportunity in that window of time to get in there and go on the run that she went on, she absolutely was like, you're not putting me back on the bench.
I know.
I'm snatching this opportunity and running with it. And she wrote it all the way through the championship finals. So we'll see. We'll see who's going to be those players to step up and sort of steal the spotlight a little bit. It's going to be exciting to watch, but we definitely think it's going to be in a top 3 finish for the Portland Thorns. And hopefully they give us all a special treat and introduce a back-to-back championship run. We'd love to cover it. We'd love to see it. But there's a lot of teams out there that are all gunning for the same prizes. And we got to chat a little bit about one of their teams. In fact, a rival, OL Reign. We're going to be back with a preview right after a quick break.
Welcome to the Split River High Afterlife Support Group.
Everyone calls me Maddie.
How'd you die?
Police are considering this a missing person investigation.
We found a blood all over the boiler room.
Oh, you were murdered.
Welcome to the club.
I need to know what happened.
I found something.
Hey everyone, welcome into Attacking Third, a CBS Sports Soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports. Joined today, as always, by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman, broadcaster and analyst for CBS Sports. On this segment, we're going to chat about OL Reign and do a regular season preview. Before we take a deep dive into OL Reign, let's give you a quick reminder. I just want to let you know, if you leave us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform, that helps us out so much here on the show. We're also on YouTube, so please subscribe to us at youtube.com/attacking third. You can get all sorts of exclusive NWSL content, previews, recaps, and interviews right here on Attacking Third. The regular season starts March 25th, and you can watch NWSL matches on Paramount Plus. And we're doing a preview for every single team on podcast and on YouTube. So make sure you tell your friends, tell your family, tell your mom's dog, tell your cousin's cat, tell everybody that you know all about the
It
glory.
never gets old. You
Tell
saying
the
that
story
never
of-
gets old.
It doesn't. I'm letting people, I got to let them know. Because you know what? So there's going to be some folks out there that tune in just to hear about their team. Maybe they
I
haven't
know.
listened to all of the team by team previews that we've done, which makes me a little sad because we're doing a lot of them, 12 of them. But if you're just joining us for your team, the team that you want to follow, and
Hi, welcome.
in this case, OL Reign, welcome. We're excited to chat about all things Pacific Northwest on this episode. Let's talk a little bit about OL Reign. They are taking their first steps into the regular season very soon. They've navigated an interesting offseason and had an interesting preseason. They are reigning Shield winners. Went ahead and snatched that Shield in 2022, a third all-time Shield winning team under head coach Laura Harvey, who is with the team still. This is technically her third consecutive year with OL Reign, but has been with this franchise for a very, very, very long time. Had briefly departed to spend some time with the national team and the senior women's national team program for the United States, but has also coached previously with Utah Royals. But Seattle is home for Laura Harvey, and she is going to get another run with this team in 2023. Some additions on the coaching staff side of things, because they said farewell to longtime assistant coach Sam Lady. He's now the head coach of Houston Dash. So a notable hire is they welcomed back Scott Parkinson as assistant head coach. Very specific title there for Parkinson, heading back to work with Laura Harvey. Had spent some time with her previously with Utah Royals, and now we'll get a chance to lead the team with Harvey in Seattle. This team, we talked about how they're the Shield winners. They finished in 2022 as the number one ranked top team, 11-7-4, their record. Similar to maybe another team, perhaps their rival, Portland Thorns, didn't have to make a lot of changes. I think they had a pretty strong team. I think that's something to be excited about, that you won the Shield, that you have a lot of good players, a good group to go ahead and make another long run in the regular season coming up. So even though they didn't have a ton of work maybe in front of them to do in the offseason, they still made some moves. And we gave them an offseason grade of a B-, which I'm okay with, because listen, they didn't have to make a ton of moves.
Right.
I would have liked to have seen, I don't know, something a little different. And just when I thought they were going to stand pat completely, Laura Harvey went ahead and did what she did on draft day, which is not really humor the draft at all, but go ahead and make a move for an experienced player to bring on to her roster. So let's chat a little bit about some of these additions. They went ahead and they participated in some trades. They got Emily Sonnet from the Spirit. They got Elise Bennett from Kansas City Current. And they went ahead and made an additional signing of a Brazilian international with a midfielder in Luani. Lisa, when we're looking at some of these moves, which one stands out for you the most?
One that stands out to me in terms of the moves that Laura Harvey and OL Reign made is the Emily Sonnet trade from Washington Spirit. This is, I mean, hindsight is always 2020, and Laura Harvey likes her veterans. She likes a defensive backbone that she can have. I mean, look at some of the defenders that are on this OL Reign team in like Lauren Barnes, Lou Barnes, that has been with this team forever. And that's what Laura Harvey likes, right? She wants players that are coming in that already have the experience, already know what it's like, have already seen success, have already seen some heartbreak, and that is an Emily Sonnet through and through. But I think it was maybe a bit more surprising because Washington then lost an Emily Sonnet. They lost a Kelly O'Hara and an Emily Sonnet. But I think in terms of the OL Reign viewpoint, and when I'm looking at it just from their perspective, it's a huge get to get Emily Sonnet to really shore up that back line that has some players, that have already really solidified themselves. I'm looking at a Lauren Barnes, a Sophia Huerta along that back line, and Alana Cook. But now you throw in an Emily Sonnet to that mix. That's like a top-notch World Cup winning back line.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you want to see on this OL Reign team, because this is a team that we will talk about for the next 30 minutes about how close they have come to winning the NWSL Championship and then how they have fallen short every single time. And it is something that is so bitter in the mouth of someone like a Laura Harvey that has been with this team for so long, someone like a Lauren Barnes, like a Megan Rapinoe, a Jess Fishlock, that all they want is to win. And they've been runners up in 2014, 2015, making it all the way to the final and then falling short. They're coming off of a Shield winning season. The third time they did that, they also did it in 2014 and in 2015, then in 2022, but they have yet to raise the NWSL Championship trophy at the end of it all in November. And that's something that really the only thing that this team has their eyes on. And so getting someone like an Emily Sonnet to shore up that back line, I'm really pleased about it. And then an Elise Bennett trade from Kansas City. I'm really interested to see how this one develops, because Bennett was a rookie for KC and had a breakout year last year, but also at a team and a club that utilized their rookies and didn't treat them like rookies, treated them like veterans and like really good soccer players like they are. And not every club does that. They treat them like rookies because they don't have that professional experience. They don't have the mindset. So that's something that I'm really interested to see how a Sonnet fits into this back line, who she kicks out of spot there, because I don't think if you're Emily Sonnet, you're not going from Washington to OL Reign to ride the bench. And then similarly to an Elise Bennett, how does Bennett fit into what Laura Harvey wants to do this year? But I mean, big gains considering OL Reign lost 0, essentially no one.
I mean, maybe you consider somebody like Sam Lady a loss in terms of what he meant to the club and the franchise. That's probably the most notable, I think, amongst their offseason losses. Number of head coaching positions opened up, and this is someone who had to take over the reign back in 2021 during a specific stretch of time before Laura Harvey actually made her return back with the club from Olympic responsibilities with the women's national team. So we're talking about a very interesting time in Reign history where you've got a longtime head coach who knows the ins and outs of the clubs and the habits of his players, and they weren't exactly getting the results I think that people anticipated for the level of talent that was on the roster. And Sam Lady took over the team after the dismissal of Farid Ben-Sidi at the time, and I think effectively turned this team around. Within the weeks-long stretch of time, they started picking up results. Laura Harvey made her return. They made a run for the Shield even in 2021, but ended up just short there as well. So this was someone who was at this point in time, I think, on multiple clubs' radar in terms of a possible future head coach. So it's almost not too surprising that eventually he went on to take on a head coaching role, maybe an opportunity that he was looking for quite some time, and now he's got it with Houston Dash. So yeah, I think you could look at that as a significant loss for the team moving forward. But I think they've also, adjacent to that, they also made a really good hire in Scott Parkinson, someone who's going to come in and try to be a real players coach and help lead the team with Laura Harvey.
I think that's honestly a bit of a like for like swap there between a Sam Lady and a Scott Parkinson, because they both have experience with Laura Harvey and coaching under her, next to her, experience in the NWSL. I think really a positive move for both sides, right? Sam Lady now gets to be a head coach at a Houston Dash club that made their playoffs for the first time ever in their club history last year. They've got a lot of good pieces that they've pulled together. I think that's a great move for Lady. And I also think this is a good move for Scott Parkinson, a coach that went from assistant coach to head coach to unemployed for a bit, now back to an assistant coach. It's not a lateral move because he lost his head coaching position. So it is a step up to then go from unemployed to assistant coach. But I think that for Scott Parkinson, it's a really good role for where he can be right now, coaching alongside someone like a Laura Harvey.
No, I'm with you. I also am just like, when they announced his hiring, it also just, made me very curious, kind of like perked my ears up a little bit to sort of hear or see the title, that it was not just an assistant coach. It's like, this is the assistant head coach. So it's not just like first assistant coach or second assistant coach. It's like, okay, this is, we're issuing some interesting titles here, in light of the addition of Parkinson. But there's also a whole roster that we got to go through. So there's some missing components here that we want to maybe highlight and address and talk about, and players who are no longer with the team and their status is kind of unknown. So we got to go through this whole roster, sort of take a look at the players who have been around, the new additions that have been made, and talk about where we think they might plug in come opening day. So stick with us after a quick break.
Meanwhile, on Paramount Mountain.
Okay, we have the northern face, the southern face, and
the Sylvester Stallone face. Of course.
Hey, how you doing? How you doing?
Is that Dad? Yeah.
No, don't sneeze.
Dear God, no.
Hold it.
Hold it.
Don't do it. Down. Ha! Gesundheit. Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, let's chat a little bit about the preseason roster that we saw for OL Reign as they build up to the regular season. 3 goalkeepers: Claudia Dickey, Laurel Ivory, and Fallon Tullis Joyce. Defenders: Lauren Barnes, Rain Brown, Alana Cook, Sam Hyatt, Shay Holmes, Sophia Huerta, Jimena Lopez, Alyssa Mallinson, Phoebe McClernand, Emily Sonnet. 10 defenders for the Reign. Midfielders: 9 with Angelina, Olivia Athens, Marley Canales, Jess Fishlock, Rose Lavelle, Quinn, Nikki Stanton, Olivia Vanderyat, Natalie Vigiano, and 8 forwards with Bethany Balser, Elise Bennett, Jordan Heidema, Tiara King, Veronica Latsko, Mariah Lee, Megan Rapino, and Mackenzie Weinert. Tobin Heath not named amongst the preseason roster for OL Reign here. One of the players that was listed on the free agency list, and at this point of our recording, still has a little bit of an unknown status. Has not announced a new club team as of this moment, and last we saw an update was from Tobin Heath herself, having gone through a surgery, and so was out for the remainder of the season, and then out for the remainder of the off season. Is back in training, getting back into fitness, but not with the Reign, unfortunately. So curious to see where she will end up in the future in NWSL. But for now, in terms of attacking players who can provide for this team, I mean, I read 8 forwards, Lisa. Who's standing out for you?
I mean, there's so many good forwards on this team. That's it. OL Reign is one of these teams similar to a Portland Thorns that hasn't changed that much, and they're still a powerhouse when I look at it. But of those 8 forwards, I mean, Megan Rapino on this list that we saw last year came in and just would notch goal, would notch assist, just consecutive games, especially towards the end of the season. I'm really looking at someone like a Bethany Balser and a Ziara King to take it to the next level this year. I think Bethany Balser is a player that we have seen had some really high highs, some pretty low lows, and last year she evened out towards the top half of the bell curve, I'm going to say, in terms of her production on this roster. But I want to see her take it to the next level and have a little bit more consistency. I'm interested to see how an Elise Bennett fits into this roster. I talked about that earlier because this is a team that already has a Jordan Huitema, a King, a Latsko, a Megan Rapinoe, a Bethany Balser. Where is Elise Bennett going to fit into that spot? Because I want to see her play. I want to see her get minutes and play. And then, I mean, Jordan Huitema, like I loved watching this player play last year. I think most recently playing with Canada and the She Believes Cup was a little bit hard to see the joy in a Jordan Huitema just with everything happening with Canada soccer. But I think that it's a little bit different when you play with your club. I mean, the firepower that this team has when all of their superstars are on the pitch, which is how we often see Laura Harvey line up. And I mean, looking at a Fallon Tellis-Joyce in goal that had a breakout year last year, I want to see that continue. Fallon Tellis-Joyce be a goalkeeper that everyone fears and that consistently keeps OL Reign in games. Then you've got Lou Barnes, Sophia Huerta along the back lines, and then an Emily Sonnet, Jess Fishlock in the midfield. Are you kidding me? A Rose Lavelle, like this roster is just so stacked.
Yeah.
It is so stacked.
It's look, you look at the names and the preseason roster and even compare it to 2022, and this is a team that is built to make another run. You know, they had a couple important re-signings in their off season. So while maybe there weren't a ton of blockbuster like free agency signings, they took care of business essentially with some of their veteran players. The re-signings of Lauren Barnes and Megan Rapinoe maybe weren't groundbreaking, earth-shattering, shocking moves for this franchise, but they were still important ones. There's a number of players on this team, with Laura Harvey, that are still trying to chase that elusive championship. So I think you've got a quartet in Harvey, in Fishlock, in Rapinoe, in Barnes, who are trying to make each other champions, in NWSL essentially. So like I said, like while it might not be like, high, headline, stealing type of signings, they were important signings, I think, in terms of those players and what they have meant to the franchise. I liked the trades, to have someone like an Elise Bennett. To get somebody like an Emily Sonnet did surprise me a little bit.
Yeah.
Because at this point, like we rattled off the position, so you're listing 10 defenders for your preseason, and I think you can go through those 10 defenders and know 4 starters at least automatically, like who we might see on opening day, whether that's a Sophia Huerta, or an Alana Cook, and now you're adding an Emily Sonnet, into that mix. Is she going to start along someone like a Lou Barnes, or how's that going to look? Or is she going to start along someone like Alana Cook? Like, where are we going to see Emily Fox for this back line, or excuse me, Emily Sonnet, along this back line for Laura Harvey? Are we going to see her in an outside back position? Because we've seen for the national team matches in 2023 at this point, she's made her return there. And we've seen her feature in multiple areas, whether it's been an outside back or in a center back position. So I'm curious as to how that backline is going to look come opening day. And I'm also equally curious about the midfield as well, because because I like the pieces that are in this midfield. It's almost like you go line by line and you can find some example of champagne problems in every single line. You're leaving there's a possibility that they may leave someone off who could be starting somewhere else, essentially.
Exactly. I mean, that's what you have to think about, right? When there's one good player that you're trying to fit into it, you only get 11 starters. You only get 3 or 4 across the back line, 3 or 4 in the midfield, 3 or 2 up top. You have to have a little bit of give and take. And I think, I mean, it's hard for Laura Harvey to do when she looks at this roster. It is.
Yeah, it's tough being a player's coach when you got to make those kinds of decisions. In terms of the personnel on this roster, who's a young prospect and experienced veteran that we can look to for this team? So who's going to be that young prospect to get in here, get involved, force Laura Harvey to start them, and who is the experienced veteran that we think this team might lean on a little bit? Again, we've been talking a lot about this as an international cycle, players who will be absent, who is someone that the team will likely look to for leadership. Young prospect, I think we're going to go with Elise Bennett in this one. Got acquired out of Kansas City Current, going to enter a sophomore season. Had some really good performances with the Current over the course of Challenge Cup, and then really kind of became this off the bench option for Kansas City when they were maybe going through such a time in a lull or kind of looking stagnant. This was someone that they could bring in and kind of mix things up immediately. She's relentless. I love her work rate. I really am hopeful that she can continue her development with Laura Harvey and OL Reign. But there's some question marks around that for me because we're talking, again, line by line. Who is going to get that time in these starting 11s under Laura Harvey? I'm not too sure, but I hope it's somebody like Elise Bennett.
I don't think it's going to be given to an Elise Bennett. I don't think that what she did last year at Kansas City, playing in 21 of the 22 games, 3 goals, 2 assists on the year for KC. She came in as her role was a super sub. She would come in, provide a spark, the immediate counter press and the ability to score goals. What she did in 2022 as a runner up with Kansas City is not going to get her playing time with Laura Harvey and OL Reign. Even though it might work like that in other clubs and other leagues and other situations, that's just not how it works. So Elise Bennett is going to have to come into OL Reign throughout preseason, throughout their training every day and prove herself, prove why she deserves to start. And Sandra, as we just talked about, this OL Reign roster is stacked across the front line, right? We're just looking at those 7 other forwards that you've got: a Bethany Balser, a Megan Rapinoe, a Jordan Heitema, Ziara King, Veronica Latsko. Where is Elise Bennett going to fit in and who is she going to kick out? And that's something that I want to see from Elise Bennett this year, because I believe she has the confidence in herself as a player to get significant minutes. No, I don't foresee Elise Bennett being a starter on this OL Reign roster. I don't. She wasn't really a starter with Kansas City. Right. She was a super sub off the bench. We're not saying she's going to be the starter and score all the goals. We just
want to see like a next step. That's all.
We want to see a next step from this player. And I think that next step could be proving herself to get some minutes at the start of the season. Can she come in the final 10 minutes of a game? Can she provide that spark for a team? And then can she build that up to be the last 15 minutes, a 60-minute substitute, a 45-minute substitute for this team towards the end of the season as it builds? And I think we'll see the most time from her during a Challenge Cup when there are some holes missing. But I think a player like Elise Bennett is going to have to really trying to be a sponge in this environment with Laura Harvey, with all of the veterans that are on this roster that she can learn from. I mean, imagine you're a young player that now gets to go learn from a Jess Fishlock, a Megan Rapinoe, a Rose Lavelle. Jess Fishlock is one that's going to have to step up as an experienced veteran, not going to the World Cup this year with Wales, not playing internationally. Jess Fishlock is going to be the one to drive this team to the top of the standings and then throughout this regular season.
Yeah, look, we chatted a little bit about Lauren Barnes and Megan Rapinoe as those important veteran re-signings out of free agency. And I think it's easy to look at a big name like Megan Rapinoe or another longtime veteran of the franchise and Lauren Barnes and say, hey, maybe this is the player that they lean on or look to for that kind of veteran experience. But again, this is a player. Megan Rapinoe is a player that we anticipate will likely be absent during stretches of this season due to World Cup responsibility. And I think it's good to go with Jess Fishlock because this is a player I think that has often found herself in a little bit of a leadership role with the team during stretches of time throughout the history of the franchise. I mean, she's the 2021 MVP. And this is absolutely someone that some of the younger players or even sophomore players or third year players are likely to look to in terms of professionalism and work rate on and off the pitch. So I think that's going to the spotlight might be a little bigger on her in a World Cup year because the Reign are likely to miss so many players during the World Cup. We've been chatting all about it. Players who might be absent for their club for extended periods of time. And OL Reign are one of the teams that will probably miss 5 or more players to the World Cup. No final rosters just yet, but here are a slew of names for you to be on the watch. Alana Cook, Sofia Huerta, Emily Sonnet, Rose Lavelle, Megan Rapinoe, all representing United States women's national team. But you've also got Jordan Huitema and Quinn representing Canada's national team. So again, anywhere from possibly 4 to 5 through 7 possible players
Massive.
who might be absent. And look, we don't even know. We're not too sure of the status for somebody like Angelina. Unfortunately, she suffered a season-ending injury, but the prior to suffering that injury was getting call-ups with the Brazilian national team. Curious about where somebody like their recent signing Lueni will have final standing with Brazil's national team as well. Who's going to be on that final roster for Brazil? So there's some question marks there as well. There's an opportunity here for a lot of players.
5 to 7 to 9 players potentially being absent for a good chunk of the summer. And yes, the way that the scheduling worked out, the most of the Challenge Cup games will be played during the World Cup window that is July 20th to August 20th. But man, these are some big names. Starters for club, starters for country, right? So big influential players. Yes, the Emily Sonnet getting traded from Washington to OL Reign, but it's a tough, top-notch group to be kind of in contention and in consideration with. I mean, there's a lot. 5 United States players that are potentially going to Australia and New Zealand for the World Cup. I mean, there's a lot of international players, a lot of holes that Laura Harvey has to try to fill at the start of the season, right? Like that's how you build these players up that are younger and maybe not going to get all those minutes. We don't traditionally see that with Laura Harvey. We don't. We see the stars play, the first team play for the majority of it until they're unavailable. But I think it all kind of has to come down to the goal for this season for this team, which kind of coincides with our biggest burning question because you and I aren't sitting in those OL Reign locker rooms right now. We're not at preseason in Seattle with this team, but we know that everything on their mind is, can we win an NWSL championship?
I say it every year. I say, yeah, they can. OL Reign was my team to pick for the championship.
They can do it. They just choke every year. What's happening?
Look, it's
a brain fart at the end of the season every single year for this team.
It's also just, I think it's also just the grind that it takes to run a table in general, but to run the table in NWSL is very, very difficult. I mean, this is a league that has been home to several international players since its foundation. And we hear all the time, there's always that chatter about what's the best league in the world and all that. And every single league in the world is going to try to claim that to fame. But when it comes to asking that question of which is the most competitive, very rarely do you find a lot of debate around NWSL. That it is very difficult to run the table and win the Shield. And the Reign have done that 3 times, and they've done that under Laura Harvey. But this is America, man. We love championships. We love home runs, touchdowns, and who wants to see some dingers? It's a playoff format. It's a championship run. It's the biggest event that closes out and marks the end of a regular season, and it is a title that this franchise is still chasing. So, will this be the year in 2023? I'll say it again. I'll say, yeah, it can be. Can this be the year? If that's the question, if the question is, can they finally win an NWSL championship? Yes, I'll just say yes, because I've said it in other years prior, and I feel similarly this year that they could have enough pieces here and go on a long run and make their return to the postseason and try to contend for a championship. Now, whether they get it done or not is going to be on them.
On paper, in theory, yes, they can do it, but it comes down to between the ears for this team.
Yeah.
It does. It really does come down to it, and being able to focus on those final stretches.
Yeah. We've got them as contenders.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we've got them as contenders. That's our projected finish for this team in 2023. Whether it ends in a championship or a shield or a challenge cup is going to, obviously depend on the team and the staff. But in terms of their finish, we absolutely have them as one of the top 3 teams in 2023. And of course, we'll be here through it all, through the regular season to take a look and see if that comes true.
Top 3 teams now that we've run through most of the previews at this point. It's Portland Thorns, OL Reign, Kansas City Current.
Boom.
There are top 3 contenders for 2023. We'll see if OL Reign can do it. Win that championship finally.
And listen, I'd love to see it. I'd love to chat about it. I'd love to talk about it all here on Attacking Third with you, Lisa. Thanks, everybody. That's all we've got for you today. Thanks for joining us on Attacking Third. Download, follow, listen to us anywhere you get your podcast. You can watch us too. Subscribe to us on YouTube to get alerts for whenever we go live at youtube.com/Attacking Third. And we'll be back with more team-by-team previews for the 2023 season. It kicks off March 25th on Paramount Plus. For Sandra Herrera and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.